All right, so let's dive into something pretty complex and crucial, and that's the Arab-Israeli conflict. You've brought a really fascinating source to the table, a book, and it's in Arabic. It's titled
Which translates to the Arab-Israeli conflict.
Okay, so we're going to unpack the insights from this book and explore the origins of this conflict, touch on some of those big moments like the 1948 war, and even delve into how international relations played a part. By the end of this deep dive, you should have a solid foundation for understanding this multifaceted conflict, no matter where you're starting from.
You know, what's really striking about this book is how it challenges some common assumptions about the conflict right from the beginning. It argues that just viewing it as something that began with the establishment of Israel in 1948 is a pretty limited perspective.
Interesting. So it's encouraging us to look further back.
Yeah, exactly. The book suggests that we need to explore events and ideologies that were already at play long before 1948. It even presents different interpretations of when the conflict really began. Some arguments point to the late 19th century, while others focus on the early 20th century.
So there's not really a single event you can point to as the definitive starting point.
Precisely. And the book really emphasizes the importance of understanding both Arab and Israeli narratives, recognizing that there are multiple perspectives on this sensitive issue.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, history is always told from different points of view, right?
Yes.
So how does the book delve into those early seeds of conflict then?
Well, it starts by examining the rise of Zionism in the late 19th century, which was a movement advocating for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The book then explores the impact of early Zionist immigration to Palestine on the existing Arab population. This includes things like socioeconomic changes and the growing tensions between the two communities.
So we're already seeing how these different groups are kind of interacting in a space that's becoming increasingly contested. And I know the book also brings in the roles of the Ottoman Empire and the British Mandate, right?
Absolutely. It explains how the Ottoman Empire's control over Palestine and then later the British Mandate's administration after World War I, they significantly shaped the political landscape. This added layers of complexity to an already tense situation.
It seems like each layer just adds to this tension building up to 1948. I'm really interested in what the book has to say about the UN partition plan. It felt like such a crucial moment in the source material you shared.
Yeah, the book discusses how the UN partition plan, which was intended to divide Palestine into independent Arab and Jewish states, ultimately failed to prevent the outbreak of war. And this led to the displacement of a large Palestinian population, what Palestinians refer to as the Nakba, which means catastrophe, a term that reflects the scale of loss and upheaval they experienced.
The Nakba. It's a powerful term. It really speaks volumes about the trauma experienced. And of course, this period also saw the establishment of the State of Israel, a monumental change in the region.
Yes, and the book examines this event within the context of the war's conclusion. It highlights the profound consequences. This includes the ongoing territorial disputes we see today and the creation of a large Palestinian refugee population, issues that continue to resonate deeply within the conflict.
1948 was such a turning point, but the source material you provided goes on to highlight other events that also really shaped the conflict's trajectory. Can you tell us more about those?
Yeah, the book focuses on the Suez Crisis of 1956, the Six-Day War of 1967, and the Yom Kippur War of 1973 as key moments that dramatically shifted the balance of power and territorial control in the region. Each of these events had profound and lasting implications for everyone involved.
It seems like every decade brought another major confrontation, and it sounds like the book is emphasizing that these events weren't just isolated incidents, they were influenced by global dynamics as well.
You've hit on a crucial observation. The book underscores the role of major global powers, like the U.S. and the USSR, especially during the Cold War. It examines how their involvement in supporting different sides of the conflict added another layer of complexity and fueled the conflict in various ways.
So it's almost like a proxy war playing out on a global stage with the Middle East as the setting. Makes you wonder if things might unfolded differently without that level of external influence.
That raises an important question about the interplay between regional conflicts and global power struggles. The book also delves into the role of international organizations, particularly the United Nations, in their attempts to mediate and resolve the conflict.
Yes. The source material mentioned the various resolutions passed by the UN. It really highlights how entangled this regional conflict is with the global political landscape.
Absolutely. And the book goes on to discuss how the shift in alliances and power dynamics in the Middle East, particularly with the decline of Soviet influence after the Cold War, created new challenges and opportunities for peace. But it also introduced new sources of instability.
So the end of the Cold War didn't necessarily bring the hoped-for stability to the region. Did the book explore any specific peace initiatives that emerged during this period?
It did. It discusses various peace initiatives and agreements attempted over the years, including the Oslo Accords in the 1990s, which initially held a great deal of promise. These agreements, signed in 1993 and 1995, were aimed at establishing a framework for Israeli-Palestinian peace, ultimately leading to a two-state solution.
I remember feeling optimistic when the Oslo Accords were signed, but as we know, lasting peace remained elusive. What insights does the book offer about why these initiatives, despite raising hopes, ultimately fell short?
Well, the book delves into the successes and failures of these initiatives, analyzing the underlying reasons. For example, it points to the expansion of Israeli settlements in the occupied territories as a major obstacle. The book argues that this expansion undermines trust and makes a two-state solution increasingly difficult, raising questions about the long-term viability of the peace process. It also highlights the disagreements over the status of Jerusalem, a city holy to both Jews and Muslims, and the complex issue of Palestinian refugees and their right of return.
These are incredibly sensitive issues that cut to the core of the conflict. It makes you realize just how many layers of complexity are involved.
You're absolutely right, and it's important to acknowledge that there are diverse perspectives on each of these issues. The book encourages us to engage with these different viewpoints to gain a deeper understanding of the conflict.
That's key. It's not about picking a side, but about understanding the nuances, the historical context, and the deeply held beliefs of those involved. This reminds me of something else I found really intriguing in the source material: the discussion of debates and controversies surrounding the Arab-Israeli conflict.
The book doesn't shy away from addressing these contentious aspects. It highlights the existence of differing historical interpretations and narratives, encouraging readers to critically examine the information they encounter.
For instance, the book mentioned international law and media portrayal. What were some of the key arguments presented there?
Well, the book examines the role of international law in the context of the conflict, presenting various perspectives on its applicability and impact. It also delves into the influence of media portrayal, exploring how different narratives and framings have shaped global perceptions of the conflict.
Makes you consider how easily we can be swayed by the information we consume, and how crucial it is to seek out diverse perspectives and sources.
Precisely. That critical lens is crucial. The book also touches upon the question of historical responsibility, a sensitive and often debated aspect of the conflict.
It's a challenging topic, but it feels important to acknowledge that past actions have shaped the present.
Yes, and the book encourages thoughtful reflection on the past, while also focusing on possibilities for the future. It's fascinating how this conflict has been the subject of so much debate and analysis. It's a topic that sparks strong opinions, and the source we're exploring certainly delves into those complexities.
It really does. The book tackles some pretty challenging questions, encouraging us to think critically and examine various viewpoints. It's clear that it's not about finding easy answers, but about gaining a deeper understanding of this multifaceted conflict.
Yeah, one of the things that stands out in the book is the emphasis on understanding the different actors involved. It goes beyond a simple two-sides narrative, highlighting the complex web of individuals, groups, and institutions that have each played a role.
It's about recognizing that there's an entire cast of characters, each with their own motivations and influences.
Right. You know, it reminds me of something I found really interesting in the source material, the way it brought those abstract historical events to life through personal accounts. It wasn't just about dates and battles, but about the lived experiences of people caught in the crossfire.
Yeah, the book does a remarkable job of weaving together historical analysis with personal narratives, providing a more intimate and human-centered perspective on the conflict. It shares stories of individuals, families, and communities whose lives were profoundly affected by the events we've been discussing.
It makes the conflict feel much more relatable and understandable. It helps us connect with the human impact of these historical events.
Exactly. Through these stories, we can truly grasp the human toll of this conflict, the enduring legacies of trauma, displacement, and loss. But beyond individual stories, the book also goes into detail about the various groups and organizations that have shaped the conflict. I'm thinking about political parties, militant groups, and even international bodies. It's a lot to keep track of, but it's fascinating to see how these different pieces fit together, forming a complex picture of the conflict.
That's a great way to put it, like piecing together a complex puzzle. The book emphasizes the interconnectedness of these various actors, showing how their actions and decisions are intertwined and influence one another. It's not just about understanding who these groups are, but about understanding the web of relationships and influences that connect them.
Speaking of connections, the book really emphasized the global context of this conflict, reminding us that it's not just a regional issue. What insights did it offer about the international implications?
Right. The book takes us beyond the borders of the Middle East, exploring how global events, ideologies, and power dynamics have shaped and continue to shape the Arab-Israeli conflict. For example, it dives into the Cold War and how the rivalry between the U.S. and the USSR played out in the region.
It's like the Middle East became a stage for this global power struggle. What were some of the key takeaways from the book's analysis of the Cold War's impact on the conflict?
Well, the book discusses how both superpowers sought to influence the conflict by providing support to different sides, and at times even intervening directly. It highlights how the Cold War rivalry intensified the conflict, turning it into a proxy war in many ways. It also prompts us to think critically about the role of external powers in fueling and prolonging conflicts around the world.
That's a crucial point. Recognizing that these conflicts don't exist in isolation, there's always a larger context, a global web of influence that shapes how these events unfold. And the book encourages us to consider the ethical implications of such involvement as well.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that beyond strategic calculations, there's a human cost to these conflicts.
Yeah.
And the book does a great job of bringing that human cost to the forefront.
Absolutely. So we've discussed the historical context, the various actors involved, and the global influences that have shaped this conflict. But what about the situation today? The source material also delved into the current state of affairs, right?
It did. The book provides a snapshot of the current realities on the ground, acknowledging that the Arab-Israeli conflict is not a frozen moment in history, but a dynamic and evolving situation with many factors at play.
What were some of the key takeaways about those factors shaping the landscape today?
Well, the book examines the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian peace process, discussing the attempts at negotiation, the obstacles encountered, and the reasons for their successes and failures. It acknowledges the deep mistrust that exists between the two sides, the complex issues that remain unresolved, and the impact of external actors. It also highlights how the political landscape in both Israel and the Palestinian territories is constantly changing, with new actors and ideologies emerging, which adds to the complexity of finding a resolution.
The book doesn't seem to shy away from the immense difficulties involved in achieving lasting peace.
It doesn't. But while acknowledging the difficulties, it encourages continued efforts toward dialogue and reconciliation. It also emphasizes the broader regional context, including the aftermath of the Arab Spring uprisings and the shifting alliances in the Middle East.
It sounds like we're living in a time of great uncertainty and transformation, making it even harder to predict what the future holds for the region and for this conflict.
That's true. The book recognizes this unpredictability, but also urges readers to engage with the complexities of the present and to contribute to shaping a more peaceful and just future.
So it's not about resigning ourselves to the idea that lasting peace is impossible.
Not at all. It's about recognizing the challenges, while also embracing the possibilities for positive change. It's about acknowledging the complexities of the situation, while still striving for a more hopeful future.
It's a call to action, urging us to become informed, engaged, and active participants in the pursuit of peace and justice. What really resonated with me was the book's message about the importance of seeking out and amplifying marginalized voices.
It's about ensuring that the narratives of those most affected by the conflict are heard and understood.
It seems like the book is urging us to look beyond the headlines, beyond the official accounts, to really engage with the human side of this conflict.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that there's always more to learn, more perspectives to consider, and more stories to be told.
And it's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping a more peaceful and just future, no matter how small that role might seem.
It's about individual and collective action, about understanding that change starts with each of us. But that's a conversation for our next segment.
You know, we've been exploring all these historical and political forces that shaped the Arab-Israeli conflict. But as we've been saying, there's always more to uncover. I'm particularly intrigued by the book's emphasis on seeking out the narratives that often get sidelined, the voices that are less heard.
You're right. The book, Tawasu Kanshisuchi really challenges us to go beyond the dominant narratives and consider the experiences of those who are often marginalized in these discussions.
It's like discovering a hidden layer of complexity, gaining a richer understanding of the conflict's impact on various communities.
Exactly. And one group the book highlights is women, both Palestinian and Israeli women. It delves into the unique ways this conflict has impacted their lives.
What insights does it offer about the specific challenges women have faced in this context?
Well, the book discusses the displacement and loss they've endured, the economic hardships, and the immense burden of raising families in a climate of constant violence and uncertainty. You know their stories. They paint a vivid picture of the human cost of this conflict, reminding us that war isn't just about battles and borders, but about the profound impact on individual lives.
It's a powerful reminder that conflict affects everyone, but in different ways. And within those individual experiences, there's even more diversity. The book also talks about minority groups, both within Israel and the Palestinian territories. What does it say about how the conflict has shaped their sense of identity and belonging?
The book emphasizes the importance of recognizing the diversity within these groups. It's not simply a matter of two sides, but a multitude of identities navigating this complex situation. It explores how the conflict has impacted their rights, their sense of belonging, and their very place in society.
And what about the experiences of refugees, both Palestinian and Jewish, who were displaced from their homes because of the conflict? Those stories must carry a heavy weight of loss and longing.
The book does a remarkable job of amplifying the voices of these refugees, allowing them to share their experiences and the enduring trauma of displacement. It emphasizes the importance of understanding their perspectives and working toward solutions that acknowledge their needs and rights.
As we delve into these often overlooked narratives, it becomes even more apparent that the Arab-Israeli conflict isn't just about land and politics. It's deeply intertwined with questions of identity and belonging.
You've hit on a key point. The book explores how the conflict has shaped the identities of both Palestinians and Israelis, influencing the narratives they construct about themselves, each other, and their place in the world.
It's almost like a cyclical relationship, isn't it? The conflict shapes identity, and those identities then influence the conflict itself.
Exactly. It's a complex web of influence. And the book helps us understand how history, culture, and even religion have contributed to shaping these identities.
Speaking of religion, the source material you shared touched on its role in the conflict, and it seems it's often been used to justify actions and even violence. How does the book approach this sensitive topic?
The book examines the complex and often controversial relationship between religion and the conflict. It explores how religious beliefs and interpretations have been used to support different narratives, and even to mobilize people for or against certain actions. However, it also encourages readers to approach the topic with nuance, recognizing the diversity of beliefs and practices within any religion, and avoiding harmful generalizations.
It's a reminder that religion can be a powerful force, and how we interpret and apply those beliefs ultimately matters. It's about promoting understanding and respect for the diversity of faiths and avoiding simplistic interpretations that can lead to division and conflict.
Absolutely. The book also explores the role of culture, examining how traditions, customs, and shared values have influenced the way the conflict is perceived and experienced.
It's fascinating how these cultural narratives can be just as powerful as any political ideology in shaping people's perspectives and actions.
They can be incredibly influential, and the book encourages us to engage with those narratives, to understand their origins, and appreciate their impact on the conflict.
It's been an incredible journey exploring the Arab-Israeli conflict through the lens of this book. We've covered a lot of ground, from the historical context to the key players, the global influences, and these crucial yet often overlooked perspectives. It's clear that this is an incredibly complex and multifaceted event with deep roots and far-reaching consequences.
It's a conflict that continues to shape the lives of millions and has a profound impact on the Middle East and the world.
It's a conflict that demands our attention, our understanding, and our empathy. And while we may not have all the answers, I think it's crucial that we keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep striving for a deeper understanding.
I completely agree. It's about fostering dialogue, promoting empathy, and ultimately working towards a more peaceful and just future.
Well, thank you for sharing your expertise and guiding us through this complex terrain.
It's been my pleasure.
And to you, our listener, we encourage you to continue exploring this topic, to seek out diverse sources and engage in thoughtful dialogue. Remember, understanding is the foundation of empathy, and empathy is the key to building a better world.